and like, hey, if you continue this, like, where is this bringing you? And I want them to tell me heart attack. I want them to tell me a stroke, because that's the reality of it. And they're just not allowing themselves to think of the consequence to protect their sanity. It's almost like I'm being kind to them by forcing them to think about bad things in a way.
Yeah. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Closers Network podcast, the only podcast you want to be paying attention to if you're looking to make more money in the remote high-ticket space. Guys, I'm excited to introduce our guest today. She comes from a background of healthcare, and she's now in the world of high-ticket sales. She spent a lot of years as a pediatric nurse working as a manager, but her love of sales and entrepreneurship pulled her in an entirely new direction. She's also gone from running a wedding dress boutique business to going and becoming a wellness coach, making life-changing transformations. She's explored Italy and also many paths. Ultimately, she's discovered her true calling in the sales closing world, a role that was able to provide her financial freedom without the burnout of running a business solo. Her message today is going to be powerful. It's going to be all about investing in yourself. She believes in building clarity, confidence, and courage, knowing that each investment that you make helps you become the stronger, better, capable version of yourself. And here's something unexpected, right? She's also a songwriter. She's penned folky tunes and more recently some house music, a real creative powerhouse. Get ready to hear some incredible insights from a woman who knows what it means to pivot, grow, and find alignment in a brand new industry. Her journey isn't just about sales. It's about breaking beliefs and making an impact for both herself and her clients. I should also mention, she just made the decision to jump on this interview with me just about 2 hours ago, not knowing at all what to expect. And I got to say, I love and respect that so much. Please help me welcome Joanna. Joanna, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Doing well. Hey, Mike. Doing well. How are you doing?
How do I pronounce your last name? I don't want to butcher it. Is it DeGrâce?
You know what? It's a debate. So you can just say DeGrâce.
DeGrâce. Okay. Joanna, you made a huge transition from healthcare into sales. Help our listener understand what initially sparked that and made you realize, like, hey, sales is my next big move.
Yeah, good question. Well, it was actually a slow burn decisional process that's been going on for the past decade for me. When I was at the hospital, at the children's hospital, 12-hour shifts, it was just very draining, and it's very rewarding, but at the same time, it's very draining. Not just the schedule, but the type of work that you're doing too. So at the time I was just like, I'm going to get into a little side hustle, right? Had my little wedding dress business on the side. And I loved that side of it, the entrepreneurial side. But then it's all about, like, if you're already working full time and you have another job, then it's like, if the concern's burnout, it's not really helping the situation. But I tried different business ventures, like, over the years, and, growing in that mindset of I want to do my own thing and seeing other people doing it, it's possible. And was a wellness coach and do that on the side a little bit as well still. But yeah, so sales has always been a part of my life for a very long time, and always wanted to go into it full time, but didn't quite have the leverage or know how to fully get into it 100% until recently.
I got you. Okay. So interesting. So what I hear you saying is, hey, like I was working in nursing, and although it was definitely fulfilling, it got to be a lot. And so I had the entrepreneurial spirit. I realized, like, hey, I wanted to kind of start my own business, and that turned out to be the wedding dress boutique. And so you're managing just a lot of things at once, and you realize, man, this is kind of a lot to juggle, especially with healthcare being as intense as it is. And so what I hear you kind of saying is you realize, like, ultimately, like, sales was going to be the pathway for you to kind of have the entrepreneurial mindset and the lifestyle, but not necessarily take on the burden of actually, like, necessarily running a business by yourself. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I only realized that closing existed maybe 2 to 3 years ago at a Tony Robbins conference in West Palm Beach, actually.
Wow.
And I was there just for personal development and with other people in sales. But only once I was there, I realized the people that I was staying with at the Airbnb were closers and setters. And I didn't really understand those roles. Like, you do what? You just close the deal? What? Like, and to me, I was like, well, that's perfect. Like, anyway, so that's when I actually learned of its existence, and having done bits and pieces of that myself, like the marketing, the customer acquisition, the fulfillment, having done a little bit of all the parts on my own, and seeing it's difficult to be a master at all of the process, like, especially when you're one. So you can't, in all honesty, be good at all of it unless you outsource, and you don't always have the budget to outsource when you're starting out. So that's kind of what I had that idea in my head for the past 3 years, that this existed, just not a clear pathway how to actually get started.
Friggin' cool way to find out about essentially the remote high ticket space is going to a conference, sharing an Airbnb with some folks at the Tony Robbins, and kind of hearing and seeing what these folks are doing, and like, what that's I hear that a lot recently in just the last like year or two. I didn't even know this was a thing, so that's really interesting to hear.
Yeah, I remember the conversation specifically. I'm like, you're a what? A closer? Tell me more. I gotta know, right? So.
And did they share anything about like what they were selling and how much money they were making, or what that kind of looked like?
They just, I knew they were well off, and like,
Okay.
I could see them investing at the Tony Robbins event. Like, oh, sure, I'll do the business mastermind. Just dropping cash like nothing. And so I'm like, yeah, she's doing pretty well for herself. So I knew there was potential, but I took a sabbatical from nursing, and just to get time off, work on my creative projects. And then on the sabbatical, I was only making 80% of my salary. So it was enough to live, but not enough to like, hey, I'm going to go spend a month in Italy or whatever. Right. So I'm like, I'm going to maybe reach out to my friend that I met at the Tony Robbins conference and ask her more about like getting involved in this, in closing. And so that's when I was dabbling more during my sabbatical. I had the time to really dive in deeper, right? Because I took a year off.
For sure. Okay, cool. That's awesome. What an interesting way to break into the space. Do you think any of your background in healthcare, or even just running your own business, like any of those skill sets transferred over in the high ticket space, especially like starting out? I know a lot of people can get faced with a lot of rejection, and if you don't have the proper mindset for it, it could end up not working out well, right? Because I think sales is a mindset sport. But how do you feel like maybe some of those skill sets, or do you feel like any of that transferred over to the high ticket space for you?
Big time. I think it was a series of small increments of personal development and just clarity of what I want, and encourage and taking those steps. Once you see the path, then you just to just go for it. And there's different ways that those professions have helped me, right? As a nurse, I was a school nurse for a long while too. So meeting with teens one-on-one, the consultative process, right? So I'm used to having, people open up to me and share about their personal life, and me giving recommendations, basically selling health is what I was doing to these teenagers, selling healthy habits. So it's very similar in sales. Like, you're meeting someone for the first time and they trust you, like that, building that therapeutic bond. Like, as a nurse, that's, you gotta get that right away. And so that's transferable in sales. So there's that piece. And there's also just trudging away at not giving up at your goals when you're running your own business as well, and the learning curve, and all of that kind of comes into play. And like, when you have your own business, whether you like it or not, you're always connected to people who are in a similar pathway, right? And then you attend these personal development conferences, and you do that work on yourself, and that kind of adds up and compounds over time.
For sure. Do you have like a surprising lesson you learned from all those experiences that applies to your sales approach today?
Well, just in terms of like the role in closing, what I'm learning more too is like, you always want to be nice. I have a tendency to always want to be nice to people. You don't want to be mean, obviously, right? But sometimes you got to really talk about the pain that them staying in indecision is causing them. Because a lot of the times, like, our brains want to just keep us safe, and we don't think of the negative outcomes. Hey, if I continue down this path, what's going to happen? We don't want to think about that. But we have to get them to think about it on the call, because it's an awkward topic, especially, right now I'm selling stuff related to health and fitness. And this is the type of conversation I tell myself, like, that their children probably would want to have with their parents, but they don't necessarily want to impose, or they don't want to be rude, or it's intrusive to talk about your parents' food habits or their workout habits if you're concerned. So I'm like, you know what? I'll take it upon myself and like, hey, if you continue this, like, where is this bringing you? And I want them to tell me heart attack. I want them to tell me a stroke, because that's the reality of it. And they're just not allowing themselves to think of the consequence to protect their sanity. So I guess that was a lesson I had to learn. It's almost like I'm being kind to them by forcing them to think about bad things in a way.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's a more new of a skill that I'm learning.
And I think that's because you care. If I had to pinpoint it down, is what I've realized in the top closers, people that know how to sell really well, is, to your point, like they do a good job selling with honesty and telling the truth, which is a conversation that I think a lot of people are kind of scared to have because it's an uncomfortable conversation. I think for me, that's what 80% of my day is just having those conversations, especially as a team leader and wearing many hats within the company and agency. It's like I've just gotten used to having those conversations. So definitely not something that's awkward for me, but I could see someone coming, from not having a background like that, or even a background like yours, having a little bit more difficulty kind of breaking into the space. But I think there's a difference in being nice and being kind, right? It's one thing to be nice, and I don't necessarily play the role of nice as a team leader. I absolutely play the role of kind, but the kindness has to include a lot of accountability, a lot of tough love, a lot of hard conversations, because I care. And that's kind of what I hear you saying, is like, hey, you're having those conversations with your prospects, the people that you're helping right now that are in a bad way, and nobody else is probably wanting to have that same conversation with them within their family, and somebody has to, but it's really out of love. It's because you care. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, exactly. Like a metaphor that someone explained to me once, it's almost as if someone's running a marathon and they got a tack under their foot. You got to tackle them, right?
Yeah.
So that they feel
Yep.
the tack, so that they don't have the consequence of having run a marathon with their tack in the foot. Anyways, that's the random metaphor that comes to mind when I need to ask those tough questions, right? Because it's not pleasant
That's
for
right.
them in the moment, but it's pleasant long term if they make a change.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And man, that's powerful stuff. I'm kind of curious, as how long have you been now in the remote high ticket space, would you say?
I've started, good question, about a year and a half.
About a
As of
year and a half ago. Okay. I would imagine from coming in initially to where you're at now, like probably every month or every week, there's still like new things that you're learning and things that are coming up. Cause I just feel sales is all about constant and never ending improvement.
yeah.
And I'm curious, when you first started versus where you are now, is there anything in the last 30, 60, 90 days that was maybe like an aha moment for you in closing that you maybe didn't know in your first 1, 2, or 3 months that you know in your last 1, 2, or 3 months?
I think a lot of it has to do with also learning my own approach and how I remember things, right? Because a lot of the
Mm,
time it comes down to the basics. And then when you review your own calls, like, well, why didn't that one go well? Oh, I forgot that basic that I should have known or mastered by now. So knowing that I sometimes forget the basics, like just making tools for myself based on how my memory and my brain works, right? So I recently just
yeah.
made a tool where I have like the key points I want to make sure I don't forget, and like I don't end the call till I've like checked off all those boxes. So I think it has to do with, yes, reviewing the basics. I will watch calls from other closers too, and I'm always learning something. And sometimes it's a matter of managing my energy. Like I want to have more conversations with more people, but I also have to manage my own energy because I got to show up enthusiastic and empathetic. And then I also want to dedicate enough time to personal development. So I'm like, I'm still managing that like balance currently, but every time I watch a call from like another closer in the team, I'm always learning things. And sometimes it's too much. I need to pause
Yeah.
and like, I'm like, there's too much good gems that I'm learning from this call. So, but yeah, it's a balance if that answers the question.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because, one of the things in training a lot of newer folks or folks coming into the remote high ticket space from a sales background is I noticed that, right? I noticed a lot of the things that you're talking about. Um, one thing I wanted to talk about is specifically what you mentioned. Like you kind of have like a framework, right? And so you put together this framework. It's not really a script from what I hear you saying. It's just like, hey, these are the bulletin points that I want to cover and make sure, because I think you've probably realized, oh, if I miss one of those things, it maybe turns into an objection later. Or if I miss this point, there's not enough pain to solve the problem, or there's not enough consequence. There's not enough why now. Can it help us understand like what's in your framework? Like when you're on that call, like what are the main points that you're trying to hit in a sales call?
So I've got, well, obviously pain is the very first one, like we were talking about, right? Like the pain of their problem needs to be more significant than the pain of the price. Otherwise they're not going to invest. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
There's doubt is a big one. If you can't get enough doubt in what they know about how to solve the problem, like why would they pay to offer, why would they pay it for help?
That's right.
And then I also have like a couple of questions under pain. Are you okay with that? So if I get them to tell me they're not okay with whatever the pain may be, whether it's a small pain or a big pain, if they're not okay with that, later on when we're ready to solve the problem, I can come back to them and be like, but I thought you said you weren't okay with that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to just assuming, so that's a big question. Obstacles, what's coming in the way for them to achieve their goals. And that's where I tie that into doubt, making sure that they don't know how to solve it on their own, or why are they seeking help. Support, what have they tried in the past that maybe wasn't satisfactory, and why did that fail? What was good about it? What was bad about it? And consequence, right? What happens if we wait to address this, get them to go down that pathway? And then vision too. You want them to imagine and feel what it's going to be like when they're at their goal, because they need to see that gap, right, between the pain that they're in now by not solving it, and then how amazing it'll feel if they do solve the problem. And people make decisions based on emotions, right? So that was something that I need to work on more. I'm very logical, right, in my approach. And so it's more a struggle, or something I'm working on more to get them to get into their feels a little bit more, right? So that's
some people are a little bit harder to open up than others, right?
Yeah.
I like to say like people are like kind of like, I don't know if you ever cracked a walnut before during the holidays or something like that, but in my family it's always been a tradition for whatever reason. Around the holidays there's always some walnuts around. Yeah. And I realized like in the years of opening walnuts up, right? There's some walnuts where I literally like I can open and crack with my own hand. I don't need a walnut cracker. Yeah. There's some walnuts where like, hey, I got to get the walnut cracker and crack it, and that'll do it. And then there's those walnuts that I'm like, dude, one hand ain't gonna cut it. I need to use both hands and really crack that nut, right? And that's kind of how like the prospects are when you show up. Like some people are going to be easier to open up. Some are just going to have so much there. They're probably in so much pain. They probably tried so much stuff in the past, and they're so reserved. They don't necessarily want to share all that information with you. So it's so important for you to build a likability and trust factor in the call. Let them know that you're there to help them. They feel heard and understood. Because if you don't do that and take surface level answers and you don't go deeper, you're going to end up in a situation where no pain, no sale. And that's exactly right. People are on the phone to get from point A to point B, and we're solving for that gap. But the entire reason that they're on the phone, guys, is to get to point B. That's the vision that Joanna is talking about, the destination, right? Every single person that you talk to in any sales cycle, in any sales call, is literally there to get to their vision, right? That's the only reason they book the call, is to get from where they're at to where they want to go. So it's all about finding out what's that gap. If you ever heard of a book called Gap Selling, I recommend it. And it just talks about this concept that's really powerful. And I love what you said about also a lot of closers don't do this, because I think this is the uncomfortable part, but it's like you uncover and you get all this information in discovery, right? And I always like to say it's the pain, labeling them with a problem. Why now? What are the consequences if they don't? What have they tried? What's going to help them? And what's the vision? Kind of all the stuff that you hit on in just now. But what a lot of closers that I see doing, and I don't know why, they don't bring that stuff back up later in the conversation when objections do come up. Because even though we try to do our best to weed those objections out, it's like, hey, I dropped $5,000. All of a sudden, it's like sticker shock, right? Well, I didn't expect it to cost that much. And it's like, well, guys, like first and foremost, you have to have some empathy. Put yourself in that person's shoes. Although they did share all of that stuff with you and the pain was big and stuff, they also didn't necessarily expect it was going to cost X dollar amount, right? So you have to start off with some empathy, in my opinion. But that being said, even if you had the perfect discovery, some people, because they just didn't think it was going to cost that much, there's some fear there, there's some uncertainty there, they're still going to hit you with the objections. And if you're not willing to bring back up all the stuff they sold you on in the discovery phase of the call, which is the reasons why it makes sense to do it, and them telling you what their problem is, and them telling you why now, what are the consequences of X, Y, and Z, everything we just shared, you're probably not going to be able to get the sale if you're not willing to bring that back up and have a real conversation. Is kind of my train of thought on it. Is that what you found on your calls?
Oh yeah, for sure. And then it's always a little awkward when you bring it back up, but at the same time, like they're grateful for it at the end of the day and they thank me like, hey, thank you for helping me make that decision, right? So that's like a good feeling. And like the
Absolutely.
PSATs, like you were talking about, that are hard to crack. One thing I guess that I've been working on this past month in particular is a lot of the times when they're having a hard time opening up, I'll just bombard them with multiple choice questions as opposed to an open-ended one, right? And I realized I
Mm,
was doing that with some role plays, right? So I was like, oh, I need to stop like harassing them with these multiple choice questions. I'm like, why is it because of this? Because of that, this, because of that? And then they're not opening up more if I'm doing that with them. So to just sit back and then open ended. But yeah, there's always room to improve all the time, obviously, right? That's one of the things
that's
with like,
right. You're only as good as your last sale.
there you go.
That's what my mentor told me early on. I used to have so Trish, myself, and Rich go back, and we used to work at Fit Body Bootcamp franchise headquarters. We
Yeah.
probably, all three of us sold hundreds of franchises for the brand.
Oh, nice.
And we had a sales director named Ken Lynch. We still keep in touch with him. Just an awesome guy. And he'd always just have these sayings. And that was one of them. Is like, hey, man, I don't care what you did yesterday, Mike. It doesn't matter anymore, right? That was yesterday. You're only as good as your last sale. And it was just like, damn, like it's so true. And there was times where like I would take some vacation time or I'd take a weekend off and I'd come back on a Monday and all of a sudden I'm like rusty. Like that thing I had going on wasn't necessarily there anymore. And I was like, what the heck's going on? And I realized how important it is to keep the sword sharp and stay consistent, have some repetition, because if you don't sell for a week and you come back, usually it takes you a few calls to really get dialed back in if you're good. And sometimes it could take a day or two. And so all the time I remember what Ken told me. He's like, and I share it with the team now. It's like, hey man, I love what you did last month, but that was last month, right? You're only as good as that last sale. So what are you going to do this month? What are you going to do today? Right. And focus on that. And so I don't know, Ken just came to mind. I thought I should mention that. Cool. So one of the things that's really interesting about you is you happen to also be a songwriter. And it sounds like between all the adventures and entrepreneurship stuff you have going on, it's like, I think creativity clearly seems like it's a big part of your life. Um, so do you have any crossover between your creative process and music and your approach in sales at all? I'm just curious.
Interesting. Well, I don't know if this explains it or not, but my Briggs Myers is an INFJ, and that's
INFJ. Okay.
yeah. And on our trip to Florida that we took with the business there, I was talking to Trish and Ava, and we all have the same personality type. So it's very creative. It's kind of like the creative and the logical combined, right? So that kind of applies in multiple areas. What the strength of that is, usually we're pretty good at like creating the future we want because
Mm,
we have the audacity to dream, right? And to be creative about what we want in life. But then we have the logical foundation to kind of go about it too. So I
mm-hmm.
that's my personality type too. And obviously if you're working a profession that's flexible and the income potential is high, you have more time freedom to do those creative projects too in the future, or more means to go about it. So it's kind of all, called like a push goal, basically. Like you want one big
Push
goal
go.
to be able to achieve all the other little ones, whatever they may be. Like if I can do amazingly well right in closing, and then then I have more time to write music, or I have more time to learn Spanish, or whatever I feel like.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's really interesting, actually. And I've always been told by Rich that sales is an art and a science.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting. It's like I feel like the science of it is really the framework, the methodology of the call, and understanding how the call is going to go and all the little layers in the call. And I think the art piece is kind of you bringing your personal touch into it, and the creativity, the tonality, the you, right? And everyone has their own self that they can bring into the call, and it's just about finding that and bringing that art and science together, essentially. Speaking of Florida, we had a lot of fun. I think you and about 20, 25 other of our team members were out there with us. I certainly had a blast, and it was a great time. What do you think, looking back at the event? Did you have a takeaway, maybe a big takeaway that was just like an aha moment from you from that event?
Well, my biggest takeaway was, like, obviously I love the speakers. I love seeing The Rock. He's like my absolute favorite.
That's
But
right.
my big takeaway was that was the same conference center where I saw Tony Robbins a few years ago. And
On West Palm Beach. That's right.
yeah, that's where I uncovered that, well, closing actually existed as a profession. And the next time I
Wow.
returned, I was there with my company, right? Doing
Wow.
pretty decently well, right? So that was like a full circle moment for me. So that was like my
That's so
takeaway.
awesome.
Like, wow, like, yeah, dare to dream and to get clarity on what you want and go for it.
Man, that's so cool. I got to tell you this because I have a younger brother. When I say younger, like he's 23 years younger than me. He's from the same parents. He's my only sibling.
Yeah.
And so he knew I was going to see The Rock. And he's so fired up about, man, my brother's going to see The Rock.
Yeah.
And I got back home and I didn't take any videos of The Rock. So what I had to do is I went on your Instagram and I showed him, I think I screen recorded that video. I was like, hey, look, bro. I was like, look, The Rock was right here. He was right in front of me. I had to kind of tell him, like, I took that video so he didn't feel bad because he really loves The Rock. And I felt bad because I didn't get to, take any photos. So luckily you had that video where you were right next to him. So I was like, oh, look, buddy. I was like, look, The Rock was right here. Da 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 da. So he was all fired up when he saw that video. So that was so awesome.
I was fired up. Well, that was I wanted to prove to everybody we can create a reality. So the night before at the Airbnb, at the little party, I was like, guys, The Rock's going to say hello to me. They're like, oh yeah? I'm like, yeah, he's going to say hello to me. Anyways.
And he did. And he did.
He did. So there you go.
That was so awesome. That was so awesome. That's so cool. That's crazy to think like, hey, you got your start right there at the convention center in West Palm Beach a couple years ago. And then, hey, you're right back there for the opportunity that kind of arose from that moment. So that's so cool to me. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned decently well. If you don't mind, I'd love to kind of understand, since the time you've been here at One Call Closers, kind of help and share with our listener, like what your biggest month here in the world of high ticket sales has been for you.
So, well, this month that just passed will be my biggest month.
Okay.
And to give you an idea, I'm doing better than I was as a nurse manager.
And nurses do make pretty good money. I mean, so that's awesome. Couple of things I want to really get into as well. So you've had to experience this balancing health, business, personal growth. What's one piece of advice you would leave to our listener to avoid burnout?
I think it comes down to understanding that if you want to perform well in any business endeavor, in any job, even, you need to be alert, you need to have energy, you need to be in optimal health. And so take care of your body should be your number one priority so that you show up in a good energy. So, and if people have a hard time saying like, oh, I can't choose between making money or taking care of my health, well, they actually go hand in hand. And what's the point of making money if you're sick and you can't actually enjoy it either, right? So when you don't know where to start with your physical body, take care of your health. And usually things kind of line up after that because you're in the right energy, you're in the right headspace to get things done.
I couldn't agree with that more. As someone who's lost 60 pounds twice and 30 pounds once now, it's been a journey for me. I'm on this journey to a six pack, and I think I'm going to get there this next year. But yeah, I mean, I know people who have been sick and they'll give everything away they have, all the money, all the assets, everything, as long as, like, if someone's terminally ill, and they know they only have a certain amount of time, money doesn't matter at that point. It's like, they'll take all of it away. Just give me my health back. So I couldn't agree with what you said more, is taking care of your own body, and that takes care of a lot of other areas of your life. Absolutely. Anyone that's on the fence right now, like trying to figure out, like, man, I work a full-time job, or I'm working part-time, but I want to get into like remote high ticket sales. What is a piece of advice you'd leave to someone that's looking to make that change, but maybe is like a little bit hesitant, but really wants to because they see what the potential and opportunity is? Like, what would you tell that person?
Very good question. Well, there's a lot of professions out there that allow you to take a sabbatical. I don't
Mm,
know with every profession. For me, that was something that I was able to do. So if your work allows you to do that, go for it. So that's my personal experience and how I was able to really transition fully. Or if you're
got it.
married and you have a spouse that can cover costs in the meanwhile, let them cover the costs while you learn the new job. I don't know. But if you're single, then see if you could look into getting a sabbatical.
That's right. How bad do you want it, right? Is going to be
Yeah,
the question, I think, to answer.
exactly. It
Do
doesn't,
you believe anyone could do high ticket sales?
I don't necessarily know that anyone can. Not everybody has the uh, capacity to handle the unknown, or like mindset wise,
Mm,
right? They need that. Even if their income is low, it's stable and they know what to expect, right? Some people will prefer to choose that versus higher income potential, but less certainty, right? Or they don't trust themselves to learn the skill. So it depends on, I think, what everyone's looking for in life. What,
for sure. What do you want? What do you desire? That's a
yeah,
good question to answer.
there you go.
Start from there.
Yeah.
Cool. Couple fun questions for you, and we'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much for your time. And again, I can't say how grateful I am for you to make the time with just 2 hours ago, making this happen. That, I'm a big believer in people who make fast decisions, get ahead very quick. One of my mentors early on told me money loves speed.
Yeah.
So the fact that you responded, you jumped on, like, no fear. No, I'm not sure. There's a lot of people I've asked to come on the podcast that still haven't come on the podcast because they're
Yeah.
just nervous. They don't know what to say. So the fact you did that, I mean, it just says a lot about you and your character. I really appreciate that. And I think that decision making is going to get you very far in life. So that's really awesome. And again, I want to thank you for that.
Yeah.
That being said, do you have a favorite sales movie or TV show at all that comes to mind that you want to maybe share with our listener?
Oh my gosh. I don't necessarily even know, Mike, if I have a favorite sales movie. I'm a little bit of a cinephile, and I'm like, I just get it whether if the movie's good or if it's not good, but
Yeah.
I don't qualify them as a sales movie or not a sales movie. I have to look
Or
up.
TV show. You mentioned The Office earlier.
Yeah,
That's a
I guess
sales. That's a
that's like
sales show.
that's a 9 to 5 grueling schedule. I don't have a good answer for your question. I'm sorry.
I got a better one for you. Do you have a sales thought leader or influencer, dead or alive, that you would want to maybe spend some time and have a dinner with? If so, who would it be, and why?
I think it has less to do with sales and more to do with the type of person who's authentic and follows their dreams, right? Whether
Mm,
that's related to sales or not in that particular person's life, then so be it. But it's more the heart of it. So The Rock is my answer for
The Rock. Okay. That's awesome. Well, maybe one day, instead of just saying hi to him from right next to him, you get to say hi in front of him, maybe like this, and have an opportunity to have that chat.
Imagine. You never know. You never know.
You got to believe it first. You got to
Yeah.
believe it first. It starts with the belief. It's kind of sad. I won't be seeing you down at the Christmas party this year, but we hope to catch you maybe the next one next year. But that being said, I really want to thank you so much for your time. Guys, if you're interested in joining our community, it's completely free. Definitely click the second link in the description below and you can get inside of our school platform. It's called the Closers Network. We do 5 days a week, live free coaching, right? The same individuals and the same people that have scaled our sales agency, One Call Closers, to over $200 million a year, $200 million in sales since 2020 are the same individuals that are giving you the guys this free game. Joanna, do you have anything to say about the Closers Network? Do you have any thoughts you want to share have you been on any of the calls, and how's that been for you?
It's been great. I love I've been going through the school program as well. And like I was talking about, there's always something to learn. And I've been going through the trainings and they're amazing. And I've been recommending them to some of my friends who are curious about it as well. And they're loving it also. So really clear, concise. I'm amazed that it's free, the stuff that you're providing for them, right? It's amazing.
Yes, for sure. Guys, with that being said, if you're looking to join, click that second link in the description below. And if you're looking for some coaching one-on-one or in a group style to really 2, 3, 4x your sales game right now, if you're already in offer, click that first link in the description below. Joanna, thank you so much for making some time and doing this on the fly again. I look forward to having you back on again. You guys have an awesome rest of the week. We'll see you later. Peace.